How did you take those two backgrounds and turn it into something that's gold and that is really working well for you today? Welcome to the Kickass Couples Podcast. This is the place where we help committed couples who want to level up their marriage experience newfound clarity, hope, and confidence. We're Matthew and Kim, co-hosts and husband and wife.
In 26 years together, we've seen a lot and never thought it could be as good as it is right now. We're here to help you successfully navigate the messy, dirty, and wonderful world of marriage.
We believe all couples deserve and are capable of experiencing an extraordinary and fulfilling marriage. And each week, we're bringing you life lessons from real-life successful couples to help you grow and strengthen your relationship.
And now, back to the show.
Casey and Meygan Caston have dedicated their lives to helping couples build healthy and happy relationships. As co-founders of Marriage 365, they've created an affordable and practical online resource that caters to the needs of couples who are struggling to maintain a happy marriage. Their most popular resource is their monthly membership program, which offers the largest online streaming services for couples. This program includes access to exclusive content and a community of like-minded individuals who are dedicated to improving their relationships. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kickass Couples Podcast. We have the holy grail of couples today. We've been trying to get together with Meygan and Casey Caston for a long time. They're famous on Marriage 365. We finally caught up with them. We are so excited to have some time with both of you today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
Glad you could be with us.
I'm so excited to have both of you here today. It's been great to watch the two of you because we all work sort of in the same space. And so I'm going to come right out of the gate and ask you, Casey, what makes you and Meygan a kick-ass couple?
We do not forget the fact that we were once at odds with each other. We don't forget that we can get there easily as well. We work really, really hard and fight for our marriage. We're very intentional with our time, and we love to have fun together. And I think that to me creates this sense of playfulness. Is a very attractive feature that we don't see in a lot of couples. You don't see a lot of couples having fun. And when you see it, it's attractive.
Yeah, I think for me, we're a kick-ass couple because no matter what's going on with our lives, with our kids, with money, with our schedules, we, like Casey mentioned, always make time. We're very intentional because if we're not, we actually quickly start to move into like fighting, unhappy, not great couple. And we feel that disconnection. And so we know the pain motivated us to change. We don't want to go back to the pain and the loneliness and the disconnection. So there's been times where we'll just be like, we're not going to work today, or we're going to let the kids watch TV and we need to fix this. You and I matter more than anything else. And I think that's why we're a kick-ass couple.
I love the word intentionality because I believe that is really what gives oxygen to your relationship. You're very intent on what you're doing and how all the 3 C's, right? Commitment, communication, conflict resolution. You are committed to being intentional about those things.
I love what you said too. A huge part of our platform is prioritization. And when I heard you say, hey, we're going to put the rest of this stuff aside because what happens between us is most important. We subscribe to that as well. And I think that most people I say 90% of all relationship problems are due to people not prioritizing their spouse because they're putting somebody or something ahead of their partner. And when that happens, it's a recipe for disaster. So I love to hear you say that. And it kind of leads into our next question. Kim and I both believe that we're products of the people that raised us. And, when we come to a relationship, to a marriage, we're bringing whatever we got growing up, good, bad, and different. And if we don't know how to deal with that, or even may not share it with our partner, it can really cause some issues down the road. So Meygan, what I'd love to hear you share with us is, what did love look like for you growing up? And how did you see your parents, whoever raised you, express it? And how did it kind of inform who you are today?
Yeah, I had one of those home lives where my mom worked really hard to make it look perfect on the outside, but behind closed doors, it was a hot mess. And it was this constant struggle. Like, do you care really more what people think about us, or do you actually just care about us? And my mom was actually the one that was more abusive and aggressive towards my father. And so I grew up in a home where my parents fought a lot. And at second grade, my mom sat me down and said, your dad's moving out. We're separating. A year later, she found out that he was having an affair. That affair lasted 4 additional years. So my mom and dad were separated on and off for 5 years of my childhood, all throughout elementary school. They finally divorced, unfortunately, when I went right into junior high. It was like the worst time, like hormones are going crazy, parents are divorcing. And it was very toxic, very, very toxic. And so I don't think I ever had a really great model of marriage, of what love looked like, just healthy communication in general. My mom was someone who definitely is an avoider, kind of stuffs, and then out of nowhere just blows up. And so you never really knew what you were going to get. My dad was just so busy with work, kind of neglected us and the kids, and just was so hurt by my mom. So my dad actually did get remarried, and he is still married to the woman he had an affair with. They've been married for a very long time. So there's been a lot of healing and processing with that. But yeah, I went into marriage very excited, but I would say that to the core of one of my things that I look back at, and I'm so grateful for, is my parents stuck me in therapy at 13 after they divorced. And it was my therapist who became my safe person. It was her that put me on the map to say, this doesn't have to dictate the rest of your life. And so I was really fortunate, actually, to be able to heal and process those things, which I think kind of gave me like an excitement to work with people and to really be very self-aware and just deal with things, because my parents didn't deal with things. They just stuffed everything or blew up at each other. And I'm like, I don't want that. I hated growing up in that home, and I wanted a different life for me. So at least I learned it through therapy, but I definitely wasn't modeled in my upbringing.
Gotcha. Well, it sounds like you weren't able to get it with your parents in that situation, but you found it and were able to pull it forward. That's a great story. And almost every couple I think we've interviewed has said they either have gotten therapy or continue to get therapy. And they, we a lot of times don't know what our blind spots are. And it's helpful to have people, or if we know what they are, but we don't know what to do with it, like, okay, what do I do? It's nice to know that you got that and were able to bring that forward. How about you, Casey? What did love look like for you growing up?
Chaos, pure chaos. My mom's been married 6 times. And so in the time that, the first 11, 12 years of my life, I lived with her. And there was never anybody ever checking in on me. My mom was doing her thing. I was, single parent. Then there was a blended family. Then there was, another husband that comes through. And so chaotic, and not like nothing was stable for me. Mm-hmm. And in all that time, my mom, this was a recent, revelation for me. Just looking back, no one ever checked in on me. No one said, "Hey, Casey, how are you doing? I just want to check in. Like, how are you feeling with all this change?" And so that was my norm. And so when I walked into marriage, like, that was just not a natural bent for me to check in on Meygan, because that was never modeled for me. Sure. So through my mom's multiple marriages, I think I felt like, well, if conflict happens, my mom's getting a divorce. If she didn't find something where there was something about this person that she was willing enough to walk away, I felt like walking into marriage, when conflict happened, Meygan's going to find something that will, it'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back. She's going to walk away because she found one thing that she didn't like about me. So I lived in a lot of fear of conflict, fear of distancing, any emotion that was distancing created a lot of tension for me and anxiety. And because, again, I never had that modeled as well, you just kind of wing it and you just react on your emotions. And so,
and let me add to this too, that when I started dating Casey, at that time, his mom was on her fourth marriage. It's hard to sometimes keep track with the timeline, but I remember he normalized all this.
Yeah.
Like his mom never called him. His mom never said, I love you. His mom and him didn't go to dinners. And I just thought, that's not normal. And he's like, it's not normal. And so, it's one of those things that you normalize what you know, because that's all you know. You have nothing to compare to. And I was shocked to see that he had normalized, because his mom on the outside is so put together. You
true.
met her,
Yeah.
you'd be like, she's an amazing person. She's educated. She's beautiful. She really isn't like a messy person. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
And she just knows how to like say the right things and do the right things. But of course, her personal life is a disaster. Sorry, I just had to interrupt because I'll never forget going, that's not normal. And he's like, it's not. I'm like, it's not normal.
So the level of like awareness and skill level of managing an intimate relationship was at a complete zero. Like just
Right.
no one had any healthy conversations with me about how to maintain a lasting relationship. We didn't know how to communicate. And even with, I was thinking about my dad remarried, and she was also this very sweet woman, but she had no emotional engagement with me at all. Even though I was even asking for that, she never engaged, like we never had deep talks. It was very surfacey. So when I think about going into marriage, and even now as we create content in Marriage 365, I can transport myself back to when we first married, and I really am talking to myself. I'm talking to that husband that's walking into the relationship unaware of his wounds that he's carrying, unaware of how to communicate. And I'm talking directly to Casey Caston 20 years ago, because that's the person that needed the most help and needed the tools and resources and awareness.
Yeah.
Right?
So I got to ask you a synthesis question, right? You each had your own challenging developments of what you did or mostly didn't see and experience. How did the two of you come together and take those two backgrounds and make it a winning relationship? What did you do? I know it's not one thing, and I know it's not one day we did one, but how did you take those two backgrounds and turn it into something that's gold and that is really working well for you today? Are you tired of feeling like you're living with a roommate instead of a lover? Do you miss the days when you were completely into each other, intellectually, emotionally, and physically? The truth is, many couples are struggling behind closed doors. Putting on a brave face for the rest of the world is exhausting. If you want to get back your joy, return to thriving, and take pleasure in your marriage, then Kickass Couples Coaching and Matthew P. Hoffman are here to help. Join us alone or with your partner and start taking steps towards overcoming the pain-filled obstacles and improving your relationship right now. For a limited time, we're offering a free relationship assessment call. Go to MatthewPHoffman.com/coaching to book your free call now, so you can start making real changes in your most important relationship today.
Well, what's interesting, it was the infidelity on both sides of our parents, and coming from broken homes, it actually drew us together in the dating years. That might sound weird to people, but we had that in common. It was like, wasn't it horrible? Oh, we didn't really like it. We don't want to be like our parents. So then fast forward, we get married, and guess what? We slip into all the bad habits, patterns. We had no tools, no resources. And so I remember at year 3 of our marriage, I had asked Casey, begged him to go to therapy. I had such a great experience. And actually his family grew up, they're anti-therapy. So that was they're another difference to add to our list. We're we're more different than alike, as you'll learn. But and he just wouldn't go, and he said it was all my fault. And I remember just wanting a divorce. And my best friend at the time, God bless her soul, because I'm so grateful she challenged me. And she said, that's a really big decision to divorce. I think before you do that, you need to meet with someone. So I met with a therapist, and she said, have you done everything and anything you can to save your marriage so you don't live with regret? And that really just sat with me like, oh, shoot, like I know my answer is no. I haven't done everything. And she goes, Meygan, 99% of the time I meet with people, they haven't done everything. They may have thought they did everything, but they haven't. And she said, if you want to make a better marriage, it starts by making a better you. And you're here on the couch, you're sitting here, you're willing, you're wanting. Why don't you live out your wedding vows in hopes that in a couple months, in a couple years, your husband, his heart will soften. And that's exactly what happened. Is I started to take the focus off of him and what he was doing and the baggage that he brought into our marriage. Because I was just finger pointing at that time, all 3 years. It was just blame shift. It's all your fault. And I started taking accountability and ownership for my own part. And I was like, well, I'm not a great communicator. Maybe I can learn. You know what? I don't even know what boundaries are. Maybe I can learn and start implementing them. And so my therapist actually walked me through 7 steps. And within 13 months, Casey, there was such a massive shift in our marriage that I remember, babe, you were in the bathroom of our 1-bedroom apartment. You just started to cry and you're like, okay, like it's so evident that I'm the unhealthy spouse now. Because when we both got married, we were both unhealthy. But I did the work to not go to that level. I'm like, I can't do that anymore. I'm not happy with myself. And so we steal that mantra all the time from my therapist, but it's true. If you want to make a better marriage, make a better you. And then Casey started to work on his own self and we started to repair marriage. And it took years,
Right.
It wasn't a quick
course.
recovery.
A lot of work.
Yeah, no, I remember this one time I was fuming, like my face was red and I'm like a red bull charging at Meygan, like, ah. And she sees me from a mile away and she just says, she stops me. She says, hey, listen, I can tell that you're really upset right now. And I want to hear what you have to say because I love you. But right now, I don't feel like it's going to come out in a healthy way. So why don't you take a walk outside, come back inside, and then let's talk in a healthy way. And that never happened before. I mean, what would happen is I would charge at Meygan, she'd charge at me. We're both very competitive people, right? And so when we were fighting, we'd fight to the death. And we would fight to win. So it got ugly and nasty. And so when she just stopped that, I mean, that was like the Iron Curtain coming straight down. And it was a reflection on me. Like I am the unhealthy spouse. And it was a great reflection. And of course, one of the biggest challenges that we hear about couples working on their marriage is that they're like, well, I'm waiting for my spouse to come along. I am waiting for my other partner. And one of the core messages behind, if you want to make a better marriage, make a better you, that's a message of self-mastery, that we have to work on ourselves. And of course, the only person you can control is you. And the only person you have authority over is yourself. Of course, that's not a popular, cultural statement right now. We want to blame shift. It's not my fault. I'm a victim. But having a healthy marriage starts by being intentional with yourself.
Right.
Definitely. I hope our listeners are hearing this. It only takes one of you
Yep.
to start the healing process of your marriage. It's huge.
It is huge. It's a mind shift change for sure, because again, our culture says something different. And I think that for anyone listening that wants to experience like true like rest and freedom and peace and confidence, the second you decide, I am no longer going to concern myself with what my spouse is doing and trying to control them or trying to micromanage them, because that was me. I'm a recovering control freak. And you let that go and you say their choices are their decisions and they're going to be responsible for the consequences coming their way of the things that they've chosen to do. But I'm going to take responsibility for me. When you give yourself that empowerment, it is so freeing and it will bring so much mental clarity and peace in your life. It's probably the best gift I gave to myself.
Sure. It's worth gold. We have 14 pillars that we believe it takes to make a successful marriage. And we really like to focus on the first 3, which is commitment, communication, and conflict resolution. I want to start with commitment. Casey, how does commitment show up in your relationship with Meygan? What does it look like?
My commitment to Meygan was on shaky ground when we first got married, because again, I lived in such fear and anxiety. And when I look back right now at my commitment to Meygan, It's founded in trust. It's founded in the fact that we're a team Caston. We're stronger, we're better together. And that commitment requires courageous choices throughout the week, right? If I'm feeling distant from Meygan, my natural tendency is to run away, or to avoid conflict at all costs. That is 100% ingrained in who I am. But courage is choosing what's right over what's easy, right? And so my commitment to Meygan is that even if I feel uncomfortable, we're going to address any issues that are happening in our relationship. Do I get it right all the time? No. It's lived out every single day. These micro decisions of, do I turn towards Meygan and towards our relationship, or do I turn away and just try to run and numb out or avoid? And so that commitment, I think we've talked about before, has ultimately, we've had to cancel film days because Meygan and I's commitment is that we want to be authentic representations of who we are. There's what you see in our videos is not like some trumped up, actors or method actors, right? Let's look like a happy couple. No. We're committed to the fact that we want to be a kick-ass couple. We want to be committed to our relationship. That is the most important thing.
How about for you, Meygan? What would you say makes you a committed spouse?
I think it's really easy to commit to someone when things are going really well. So on our wedding day, it's very easy to commit and say our vows because we're in love and we feel the good feelings. And, we have a whole life ahead of us. But the people who are committed are the ones, in my mind, that show up at the hardest times, the most challenging times. We've gone through infertility. Our son was diagnosed with autism. That was a really rough season. We've had toxic families cut us out of their lives, job losses. The list goes on. And it's actually the commitment, in my mind, that when we turn towards each other in the hardest times, that shows our commitment to one another. Like, we're not going to give up. We are going to pursue each other. We're going to fix this. We're going to figure it out. If we can't figure it out, we're going to raise our hand and we're going to go get help. But we are 100% committed, even when we're stuck, which happens to even experts, right?
Of course.
We get stuck too, that we are not going to just give up. And the thing for us, the motivating factor is that, do you think Casey's mom on her sixth husband is happy? Nope. And my dad's on his third marriage, and so it's kind of one of those things, like, in a good way, we saw a lot of people think, well, it's just I married the wrong person. And really for us, we saw a lack of true commitment in a marriage, of really figuring it out. And of course, starting with figuring out yourself first. But that's how I view commitment. Is it's easy to commit in the easy times. It's really hard. It's people who show up in the hard times. Those are the people who are committed, that are truly committed.
You keep fighting for the us, the we. That's what you keep working towards.
Yeah, I know. I work with my co-author of my book, Chris Cambus. I steal his phrase all the time. He goes, every marriage, you're marrying somebody else's set of problems, and you may as well stick with the ones you know and familiar with instead of trading them in for another set that you don't know and you're not sure how to deal with, because you're going to have a set of problems no matter where you are. And it's just, I'm committed, like you said, Meygan, I love that we're going to figure it out. And if we can't, we're going to get help to figure it out, because it's not an option. We have too many options to hit eject in life on so many things. But the beautiful thing about marriage is when you make that investment and you're sticking in the tough, the rewards are
God bless Meygan for sticking it out with me.
You know what's interesting is people don't talk about the statistics on second marriages and how you have an even higher increase in chance of divorce. Yeah. And people think like, oh, they don't want to really talk about why. But the reality is that if you believe that you married the wrong person your first time, you marry a second person, like you just said, Matthew, that person now has their own set of issues. And if you didn't deal with yourself and you're not focusing on yourself, it's always going to be someone else's fault. You rarely meet a divorced person that says the first statement is, well, you know what? I really, really, really made a lot of mistakes. I really shouldn't have did this, or I missed the red flags. It's very rare you hear accountability for someone who's been divorced. It's usually, well, my spouse cheated on me, or, oh, I married a crazy lady. You'll hear that all the time, right? Working with couples.
We're all
Yep.
we're all victims. That's what I hear.
100%.
Excuse, yeah.
So it's the people who do get married a second time. For those listening, they're like, great, I'm on my second marriage. There are people who have a happy second marriage, but they did the work on themselves. And they said, I know what we messed up the first time, and I'm not going to do it again.
Right. I love that recommitment. And
can
it
I-
kind of, if we go to our, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I want to add something that I think is really important, because if your commitment is not like cemented inside your mind and your heart, then it doesn't give you the energy required to put the hard work in. Because if you're not committed, you're like, well, I'm like 90% sure we're going to make it, but there's a 10% that, I just, and you kind of throw your hands up, you give up working on yourself. You give up working on your marriage. And I'll never forget, of course, 1519, Cortez lands on mainland Mexico. And famously, the men are hiking up the hills and the valleys, and they turn around and Cortez burns all of his ships. Because there was a commitment, 100% commitment. Like, hey, we're here. We are seeing this through no matter what. There is a resolve. There's no like turning back there's no like escape route. We're 100% in on this. And I think I really feel in this cultural moment, like you said, there's a lot of people that don't, they call them starter marriages, or they don't value this commitment that they make. Like, hey, this is us in our vows. In the good times and the bad times, we are going to see ourselves through no matter what comes our way, for as long as we both shall live.
Yeah.
When you say those words, you are burning the ships.
Yeah.
But maybe like a Magna
I love
Carta.
that visual.
Yeah, maybe like the Magna Carta or the Declaration of Independence. We go back to that document to remind ourselves, this is what we committed to
Right.
300 years ago.
And I think the biggest lie, and it reminds me, is that people think that commitment is restrictive and suffocating.
Right.
And the exact opposite of we've been talking about is true. Commitment is freeing. When I know that I don't have to worry about, does she love me? Is she going to be there for me? Does she have my back? Is she going to support me? When I can put those concerns out of my mind, I'm thinking about progressive steps and moving me and her and us and the family forward. So committed is one of the most freeing things, because when we know unconditionally, unequivocally, no windows, no doors, no plan B, I don't have to worry about so many things, and I can really focus on forward movement.
And that is proven in multiple research and studies done on the family unit in general. When children are grown up in a home where there's commitment, it's unconditional love. They know, like, no matter what I do, even mistakes I make, mom and dad are still going to love me, accept me. They're not going to just write me off or push me out or kick me out or whatever. Kids grow up in such a healthier life, and they have such a healthier mindset of what family is. And so it's interesting because so much in marriage, right, it completely speaks to our parenting and how our children now then grow up and move about as adults. And so your commitment to one another as husband and wife also greatly impacts your children.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just the two of you, but they're watching. And as we move into our second C, communication, which is really kind of the glue. I did a post of this last week, and I said, communication is like the crazy glue that you mix up yourself based on the quality of relationship of what you're saying in all the different ways in your life. So Casey, I'd love to hear, what does communication look like between you and Meygan, and how has that been working for you in your relationship?
This is going to be fun.
Boy, you put me on the spot first, huh?
Or you can phone a friend if you want Meygan to jump in and go
I
first.
want to hear from Meygan first.
All right,
I knew he was
Meygan,
going to say that.
All right, you're in the ring. He's back off the ropes.
I'm happy to go first, just like the bedroom. Oh, okay.
Whoa.
So for both of us, we're both talkers. We're both extroverts. We both are very opinionated people. So when we're not healthy, we don't have healthy communication. And the biggest thing I would say that we have really worked hard on, and we do not get it perfect, but is really trying to listen, to understand the person's perspective and feelings. It's what we call it spousal awareness. If we're talking and we're communicating, it's like, what is he trying to get at? What is he feeling? Oh, look at his body language. Oh, he must be stressed, and trying to pick up on those cues. And I know that that takes time and there's practice and learning and whatnot. But I will say that's really helped us in having really open and honest conversations about anything, like hot topics, even where it hasn't had to move to conflict, because we've been able to have healthy communication. I think also too is validation. Like at the end of the day, I want to be validated that my thoughts and feelings about whatever, not even just our marriage, about the kids or money or this thing I'm dealing with a girlfriend of mine. Like I want him to validate me. I think that's part of the understanding perspective. But then the thing that, we would say has radically changed our marriage is something called the weekly marriage business meeting. It's a once a week meeting. We do it Sunday nights after the kids go to bed. If we do not do this meeting, we do not do well in marriage in general, but it's communicating about all of the logistics, date night, money, meal planning, schedules, kids schedules, sports schedules, because we're in that phase right now. Alone time, self-care time. For us, we schedule sex. That's when we pull out our calendars, but we really go through our whole week and we just have these conversations before everything's happening. So we're not stressed in the moment. We ask questions like the checking in. Is there anything I can help you with this week? Is there anything last week that we didn't do well that we need to change? Anything like that. Is there anything I need to apologize for? But just that consistent, but actually putting it in the calendar commitment to communicate about life and logistics on a weekly basis has been a game changer for us.
Love that.
Okay, so I love Meygan. Meygan gets straight at the blocking and tackling of life. And then for me, this question required a little bit of thinking about communication. And I'll take this a little bit higher elevation in the fact that, to be an effective communicator means you have to have, a higher level of emotional intelligence, right?
Sure.
And to develop that requires time in solitude, time to think about oneself, time to tell if you can hold space for yourself, then you can hold space for someone else. But in a distraction driven culture, we don't hold space for ourselves, because when we're standing in line, we're scrolling through Instagram. When we're sitting on the toilet, we're scrolling through, social media. Like, we don't create space where we can be one with ourselves. And so you have to be intentional about that. And so I just think about, like, when we were first married, I just carried myself back to that point where there was no time for processing, to think about, that last interaction. We actually call this these autopsies. We do this with couples. When you think about, my last interaction with this, my spouse, like, she said this and I started thinking this, and then, oh, that's what happened when, I was triggered by her saying those things. And more recently, Meygan and I, when we've been triggered, we both take time to go, like, what was that all about? And then we can come back and say, when you were telling me this, I was feeling very triggered because of this. But that takes time to think about it. And I don't think that we're living in a cultural moment that we don't take time for self-care. We don't take time for processing and thinking through those things. And that autopsy, by the way, is so valuable for couples that are trying to heal from some of the wounds of the past, is to be able to sit down in a space that is not, where they're not triggered emotionally, and then to process, like, what happened there? What were you thinking? This is what I was doing. Oh my gosh, and that does require maturity.
Sure. Are you struggling to maintain the emotional and physical intimacy you once shared? Do you feel like you're spending more energy finding fault and tearing your partner down instead of magnifying their good and building them up? Don't worry, you're not alone. Many couples are struggling behind a forced smile and an inauthentic happiness. You feel drained, unheard, and more often than not, unappreciated. The good news is it's not too late to rekindle the flame and strengthen your bond. I'm offering a free relationship assessment call to help you take the first step towards revitalizing your relationship and reaching your own relationship nirvana. Whether you come alone or with your partner, I'm here to help you create the space for a more fulfilling and satisfying relationship. Don't wait any longer. Make the changes you need to thrive. Book your free call today at matthewphoffman.com/coaching. And let's get started on your journey to a kick-ass relationship.
I want to move on to conflict resolution because
Speaking of,
we're always going to have conflict no matter what, right? It's always going to show up somehow in our relationship. So, Meygan, how do you resolve conflict when you and Casey see those things arise in your marriage?
it's makeup sex, right?
He keeps trying to get me to do makeup sex. It's just
I've had people say fight naked, so everything goes.
Putting the cart before the horse, Casey. Come on.
Have you heard the dad joke that says, my wife and I were arguing, and in the middle of our argument, she took off her shirt. That's when I knew it was a booby trap.
my favorite.
That's awesome.
Oh, see, fun and humor. It's coming out.
That's
I
right.
love it.
Oh yeah.
Ding, ding.
Humor is-
All right.
Okay, so for us, one of the things, a technique that we use that's been very successful is something we call the code word. So this is when we know either we're going into flight or fight mode. For Casey, he's mentioned he's an avoider, so he's definitely a fighter. I am a fighter. I'm strong. I will keep going. And it just doesn't end well. And you know, when you're emotionally triggered and you're flooded, nothing good is going to come from your conversation at that point. You're going to be hurt easily. You're going to say things you don't mean. And this is what couples do, right? So in order to protect us and protect our marriage, we use our code word, which is something very positive. Right now, it's Humphrey's yogurt, which is where we met. And and once one of us says that word, Humphrey's yogurt, the two words, Humphrey's yogurt, no other words can be spoken. And we basically give each other like an adult timeout, like time to process, time to go take a walk with the dog, stretch, take a bath, do yoga, pray, journal, whatever, something positive. That way we're protecting our marriage from going really into a bad place because we've been there many, many times and we don't want to do that. And we don't really escalate to that point anymore because we use the code word. But the thing is after the code word said, you know, you spend about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, depends on how bad the fight was. You have to come back to it, right? And resolve it. And that's kind of that autopsy that Casey mentioned is we autopsy, like what triggered you, what triggered me. But I think one of the things that I've just realized in marriage is like, you have to be humble. You just have to start with an apology. Like if you just say like, you know what, I could have been better with my tone, or, you know what, I kind of approached this at a really bad time. You had a really stressful day at work. You may not even really be actually in the wrong or think you're in the wrong. But if you show up and you're humble to admit something that you could have done or that you might have done that hurt your spouse or wasn't the best, that brings defenses down. And that's the goal, right? We want to bring defenses down because if we never bring defenses down, we're always going to be in that flight or fight mode. And so I've just learned that with Casey and he will tell you, like the best thing he could do to come to me is just give me an unsolicited apology. Just, babe, you know what? I'm really sorry. I snapped at you. I don't even need much more actually after that, just taking accountability and ownership. Or, you know what, I really made that choice and I didn't even include you in it. I'm so sorry. And for me, I think coming to the conversation of just admitting something that I did wrong, like, you know what, I've been just too busy with the kids lately, whatever that is, if you start a conversation that way, it's going to help bring defenses down.
Yeah. Okay. So taking ownership and having a code word. I love the code word idea, listeners. It's really effective. How about for you, Casey?
Yeah, well, on that code word, it's funny because it kind of follows along with your C's here. That the way I draw it out for in coaching sessions is like you're communicating about something, then you find something that is divergent from your thoughts because, oh my gosh, we're two different people. So conflict is going to happen. And in that state of conflict, if you don't have tools, if you don't have the emotional awareness or and maturity, is that you will take it personally. My spouse thinks different than me. That must mean something against me. And then you move from communication to conflict into combat. And that combat is that area where a lot of couples find themselves, and then they're fighting about the way they're fighting. So it's just, the dog chasing the tail. It goes around and around. And couples get stuck in that. So the code word is really effective. I wouldn't change a single thing that Meygan said. The only other additional thing that I think that couples don't have, and Matt, you kind of talked about this earlier, is that we all carry these wounds into our marriage. And I would just say with conflict, when you're trying to resolve conflict, I think it's really important to come to the conversation with a sense of compassion and to be compassionate. And compassion recognizes the stories that we walk into the room with, the wounds that we walk into the room with. And when Meygan and I are doing these intensives, this is couples in crisis, affair recovery, or they're considering divorce, we spend a full day unpacking their stories, because what we're eliciting is this sense of compassion. Like, hey, you may see across from yourself an adult male, but you may not understand that he's walking into that room carrying the wounds of a 12-year-old who's looking for validation, or just got emotionally shut down, or for Meygan, someone who's been largely ignored for all his childhood emotionally, but she sees an adult male. There's expectations, like, you're going to act like an adult. No, I'm actually going to act like a 12-year-old, because that's the state of stunted growth.
What I know.
That's what I know. Exactly.
Right.
So that compassion is so powerful.
I love that. Yeah, understanding what you're facing and treating it with kid gloves, and as opposed to what may be presenting, because I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, if we all had the benefit of this, maybe we'd be in different places, but you guys got 20 years into this game. So you become seasoned, you've learned a lot, and you've grown. But Casey, if I'm going to try to put you on the spot again, and you can tag out if you need to, and that's okay. But if you could go back to your unmarried self and put your hands on your shoulders before you got married and say, all right, here is my advice to you as you enter your marriage, what would you tell your unmarried self on how to approach marriage?
The number one piece of advice that I would have given myself is to lower your expectations. Like, I went into marriage thinking that we were going to, like a cuckoo clock, every hour we're going to have sex. And that was going to be like the chime of, okay, it's 60 minutes, let's go. Like, I had, yeah, hey, come on. I did wait until I was married. So there was a lot of expectations riding on that. I had expectations that Meygan was going to meet all of my woundings. She was always going to be there for me. The expectations were so high walking into marriage. The idealization of like, oh, we're just always going to have fun, and we're never going to have to deal with the conflicts, because conflicts for bad people. We're good people. It was just so fanciful of what marriage was supposed to be like. And I think that if I was able to lower those expectations, all of the angry outbursts, right? All of that like, anger towards these broken expectations. I mean, we wouldn't have had as horrible of a marriage before that, because growing up, I wasn't an angry person. And I remember the first couple of years, I was like, I'm not an angry person. And yet with Meygan, I am absolutely furious. And at the slightest thing, provocation, I would just explode on her. And now looking back, I realized because I had such crazy expectations. And so the pedestal was so high. And once the floor dropped, right, it was a big fall for me.
Right.
So lower
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you shared that, babe, because I would agree with your answer for you.
I mean,
Because no, but you guys, I felt those expectations placed on me, right?
Right.
Like he
A
was
lot.
giving those and he wasn't communicating them, but boy, I sure felt that pressure constantly.
well,
And
in dating, we both talked about these mommy wounds, and we both like had this connection about like, oh, you know this pain too. Oh, I have this pain too. And so that actually created this connection that I thought she was going to be solving when I got married.
Mm. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Expectation. So, Meygan, how about you? If you're going to go back to your unmarried self before that balloon burst and say, here's the one thing you need, my best advice to you about marriage is, what would that be?
yeah, get really good at apologizing, choose to forgive and let go of the pain, or you're just the one that suffers, and to create boundaries. I know that that's not technically one thing, but to me, they all work together. So, we apologize, but we apologize and hopefully change. We don't just say, I'm sorry. And so I think both part of the apology is also extending forgiveness. And Casey is such a beautiful example of being quick to forgive. And I'm not. My parents hold grudges. So that was modeled for me. I think too, I would just working with couples, I've noticed that women tend to be the ones that hold on to grudges more than men. So I don't want to stereotype for everybody, but for us, that would be accurate. And I've learned over the years that the sooner I forgive and let go, the happier we all are in the marriage. And I just, for so many years, just wanted to hold on to that hurt and that pain and justify it. And it felt unfair. And it wasn't until I actually learned more about the forgiveness process, because I think everybody actually wants to forgive. They just don't know how. And that is what I wish what I wish I knew, if I could go back and say, Meygan, get really good at apologizing, get really good at forgiving, and get really good at creating healthy boundaries in your marriage, because those are the things that heal and protect your relationship. And they're going to happen. It's going to be all the time, because you're two imperfect people who have different perspectives, different beliefs, different upbringings, and it's going to get messy. And then there's external things like the pandemic, or again, our child being diagnosed with autism, things that are out of our control that we could have never planned for. What are you going to do in those moments when you're hurting?
Yeah. Casey, you touched on EQ a little earlier, self-awareness. And I want to ask you, what do you do, or what can you share with our listeners that you do for self-care so that you can show up as your best in your relationship?
Yeah. There's a habit that I've actually appreciated. First of all, waking up in the morning, before I engage with other people, having time to self. For me, it's scripture reading. I love the book of Proverbs. There's 31 chapters, so you just pick a proverb a day, whatever date it is, and I feel like that kind of gets me in the right mindset throughout the day. Though, one of the things that I love doing is just even taking 5 minutes to myself and literally doing nothing. I'd sit outside and stare at clouds, and it was just a moment for me to pause from just doing stuff and actually just reflecting on, where am I at? What's going on inside me? Like, how's my day going along? Like, am I showing up in a healthy way? Like, is Meygan and I connecting? Are we feeling connected? Again, there are days that I don't get to that, and it just the day goes through and it's just like one task after another, shaking hands with 1 hour to the hour, and you move through the day and you don't even check in with yourself. So self-care also looks like just that moment of checking in with self. So it requires time. One of the things that Meygan and I do is we do spa days. So this is, we go to a spa, we check in the morning, and that day is a day of reflection, a day of journaling, a day of sitting in the steam room or the sauna or working out or getting a massage, and just spending that day really looking back, like the full month or whatever that the time frame is, and just saying, like, how have I shown up? And it's in those moments, it's like the autopsy, right? It's in those moments we got to go, okay, I'm going to make a conscious choice to make a change, or maybe I need to check in with Meygan because there wasn't a great interaction or something's left unresolved. That's the time for me to personally check in. So
Best part about the spa, by the way, is there's no technology allowed. Like, you can't have your phone. So it really forces you to be one with your thoughts. But sometimes we just do spa days generally just for rest. Like, I just need rest.
Right.
No. For me, I exercise. I have always worked out. I've always loved it, but I don't exercise for my main purpose of losing weight or looking good. For me, it's mental, it's spiritual, and it's emotional. Those things first are my top priority. I feel better. I feel like I have more energy. I'm a nicer person. I'm a more patient mom and wife. Of course, I feel more confident physically in and out of the bedroom too with Casey, but self-care for me is definitely getting active. And, some people aren't into the gym. They say there's about 400 different options of working out, 400 different options in America. I mean, you've got every kind of class. You can do yoga with goats. I mean, if you maybe don't like yoga, but you like goats, do goat yoga, right? I mean, there's so many things you can do. Sometimes it's just walking the dog in our neighborhood and getting outside and being active. I think the big thing, though, for people who exercise is try not to, and this can be really hard, try not to listen to a podcast, or try not to listen to music sometimes when you're active, like just be active. But I know I also walk my dog and will listen to podcasts too. I'm pro podcast, but I do think that a lot of times you're not even allowing your brain just to not have technology or like learning time, like Casey's mentioning, just be one with your thoughts, which Casey, I'm surprised you didn't mention. He loves to surf. And that's another great thing is there's no tech in the ocean. So he's just out in nature. Being out in nature is incredibly healthy form of self-care.
Right. You guys have been so gracious with your time. We would love to sit here for hours more.
I know. I feel like we could go on. And
we've gotten so many great gems from you. But before we sign off, if people want to learn more about Meygan and more about Casey and more about Marriage 365, where should they go and what can they do?
All right. So head to our website, marriage365.com. Our number one resource we have is a monthly membership. So think like Netflix mixed with masterclass, mixed with therapy all in one. And it's on our app. It's incredible. Both spouses can get access, but it's really neat because the reality is that a lot of people, they just won't go to therapy or they can't afford it or they don't have access to it. And it's just an incredible way. I know you guys are members to Marriage 365 to learn and to grow and to heal. And again, we created this product, this service to really allow an individual spouse to learn and to grow. I mean, ideally, of course, we want you to do it with your spouse. But if you're listening and you're like, my spouse isn't on board, I'd give anything for them to listen to this podcast. This is a great, great resource for that as well.
thank you both for showing up today, for being vulnerable with our listeners. We are so grateful. I feel like we need to do a part 2. Hopefully
Yes.
we can do that again.
No, because
in the near future.
I don't even think we got half of what we wanted to cover with you guys. Because so much good stuff.
You got to invite us back and we got to talk either about toxic family dynamics, because we are experts in that field from personal experience, or sex. We love to talk about sex and intimacy. It's one of our favorite topics to talk about.
That's perfect. We will do it.
Thank you. Well, we appreciate you and we are grateful for the time, and we know there's going to be lots of good things to pass on. So thank you for joining us today. And as we exit, we just want you to remember one thing.
Happily ever after doesn't just happen. It's on purpose.
Thanks, guys.
That's all we've got for this episode of the Kickass Couples Podcast. If you like the content of this show, you'll love Matthew's newly released book, Kickass Husband, Winning at Life, Marriage, and Sex. To receive a digital mini book of quotes and images from the book, all you have to do is rate this show and leave a review in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen. Then email us a screenshot of your review at podcast@kickasscouplespodcast.com, and we'll get it over to you right away. Until next time, remember, happily ever after doesn't just happen, it's on purpose.